Welcome back. We're thrilled you could join us for another episode of Technically Edinburgh. We are a brand new podcast created by technicians, about technicians, and for, well, everyone. Have you ever wondered what technicians do behind the scenes? What does that job title even mean? And what on earth is a technician commitment? We'll be chatting to staff across the university to find out why technicians are so essential to our work. We can't wait to get started, so grab a drink, get comfy, and let's get Technically Edinburgh.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Technically Edinburgh, a podcast for and about technicians at the University of Edinburgh. My name is Lee Murphy.
And I'm Charli Corcoran, and our guest today is David Brown. David is the Estates and Technical Manager at the University of Edinburgh School of Chemistry, a role which he's been doing since 2018. He's been a member of technical staff at the University of Edinburgh for over 20 years, completing his PhD and a postdoc here before that as well. David is the winner of the 2024 Technician Award for contribution to facilities and infrastructure for his outstanding efforts in navigating a difficult period for the School of Chemistry community. Welcome, David. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us.
Hi, nice to see you.
Congratulations on winning the Technician Award.
Yeah, it was quite a surprise, actually. I kind of knew I'd been nominated, but I had no idea, so it was a very nice surprise on the day.
Well, that's good. It's always nice to be surprised. And did you get to go? You were there as well, weren't you?
Yes. They decided to go along and represent the school and to see what was happening from a kind of technical promotion point of view. I think it is time. Obviously, there's moves afoot, and it is time to kind of get the technicians more in the limelight.
No, we agree. Obviously, that's why we're here to share technician stories. So we do want to talk about the Technician Award. But first, can we ask about your current role? What's your current role?
Estates and Technical Manager for the School of Chemistry. It's an interesting role. It takes everything in from building fabric, the whole estate, building fabric, 2 buildings, to kind of the facilities, all the services and infrastructure inside, liaising with estates and buildings, space management for the school, facilities within labs, grassroots health and safety, helping our health and safety manager, security, you name it. I mean, it can cover whatever comes up, to be brutally honest, you can be asked to do. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy it so much, because it's an incredibly varied post. Very responsible, very varied.
Sounds like no day is ever the same for you.
And that is one of the reasons I love it, because you literally don't know what you can be coming into.
So how did you get into that role, David?
So I was doing a fellowship at the Western General, and essentially it was in hindsight, it was a kind of flawed project. It was never really going to fly. And the money started to run out, and you're on a month-to-month contract, and you've got a mortgage to pay, and it was a horribly painful kind of experience, to be brutally honest, that a lot of technicians, and to be fair, research scientists find themselves in, on a kind of month-to-month contract. Then there was an advert for a centre lab manager post at the Swan Building in the Wellcome Trust Centre at KB with Adrian Bird. And I think when I went for the interview, I was able to explain to them my vision for the role, and the fact that having been a research scientist and had a fellowship, I knew exactly what they needed somebody to provide to support and maintain and facilitate the science.
So just to explain to our listeners, you got your first degree in immunology. You did a PhD again in immunology and parasitology at Roslin. Then you carried on with postdocs and fellowships, that usual kind of academic path. So this must have been a big change then, going from that kind of academic pathway into more of a technical role.
It was an interest. So the jump into the kind of postdoc and fellowship, I changed subject. I went into neurobiology, and to be brutally honest, I wasn't that good at it, to be honest. And it's probably one of the other reasons it didn't go that well. I had found that during my research career, brief as it was, I was quite good at solving problems when things went wrong in the lab, and I knew that people needed things to be working. So I was quite happy to try and help and get things fixed. I'm kind of driven in many ways by service provision. I want people to be able to do what they need to do. to support the science. So I didn't find it massively hard transitioning. I mean, it was a bit weird not being at the bench anymore, but it was a case of, oh, this is broken. How do we get it fixed? And if it's not fixed, we're losing lots of research time and it's costing money. And, so I kind of just switched fairly quickly and got my kicks from that instead of being at the bench. And to be brutally honest, I think I'm more suited to that kind of role than the academic role.
Yeah, I mean, I think, some people, maybe academics, would look at your career path and see you as a failed academic, and then other people would look at your career path and see you as a successful technician, and
gee, thanks for that.
Different viewpoints for the same career. But, what do you think you took from your kind of academic career that you could then really use a technical career, that you're really kind of pleased that you have that background?
It was really good to see how things work on the other side of the line, to see what the academics, in some ways, to see how they think, which is not an easy thing to do. The inside of an academic's mind is a weird place.
Lots of different pressures, aren't there, they've got? Yeah,
and it kind of means that sometimes it's good to be able to almost anticipate what they might need. Not to second guess them, because that's when you make mistakes, but you have an inkling of what they might need before they ask for it. And it gives you a head start on solving the problems or organising a new system that will help them. But yeah, I mean, it was an odd transition. And for quite a while, I did describe myself as a failed academic, but now I've decided to rebrand myself because it was a very positive move for me to become technical rather than, academic.
And you've been promoted, so you started off as a lab manager, is that right? And then a building manager, and now a state.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say promoted, because obviously we can't be promoted.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
That's one of the problems we have in the technical sphere and the professional services sphere. So I did 5 years in the Wellcome Trust Centre for Cell Biology, and essentially I loved it there, but I got bored. There wasn't enough for me to do. I'd kind of solved the problems and moved on. I spent 10 years in Ashworth looking after 3 buildings for biological sciences in the Ashworth labs, and that was slightly surreal. That was where I did my degree. So going back as the building manager to the place that you did your degree as a kind of a bumbling idiot, that was quite interesting. And there was 1 or 2 people that remembered me, which was even more surreal. But so I spent 10 years there, and during that time we did a lot of upgrading to the buildings. We completely kind of revamped and refurbished Ashworth Building 2, which was the main building I did my degree in. And that was a wonderful project. And I remember saying to the higher management towards the end of the project, I need more challenges. If you don't give me more challenges when this project is finished, I will need to look for a new role. And unfortunately, for whatever reason at those times, it just didn't pan out that way. And I started looking around. And chemistry were looking for an estates and technical manager, which instead of just being the building manager, you're the estate manager. And you could say, well, chemistry is a smaller school. And it is. But I manage a much bigger team. So I've got a team of, I think it's around 16, 17 people. And that's the teaching technicians, fantastic group of people who do the hands-on practical stuff with the students, the undergrads. And then I also manage the workshop and the glass blowers. So we've got a really, really good mechanical engineer, electronics engineer, and a glass blower. And between the 3 of them, they can kind of fix and keep anything going that you can imagine, from mass specs to NMRs, and make wonderful scientific glassware. I say scientific glassware very, very carefully. He's very passionately known as a scientific glass blower, not an art glass blower. He gets very upset if people get confused. So essentially being responsible for kind of leading that team means that you are essentially responsible for keeping so much going across the school and providing what the school needs at the grassroots level to keep the research and the teaching going. It's very, very reactive. Things break. How do we get them fixed? In the middle of a class of, between 50 and 100 undergrads, if something major happens, say they lose their vacuum lines, so they can't filter their precipitates, etc., get in there and get it fixed so that you don't screw up the timing for the practicals. Because the timetable's so tight now, that you can't reschedule practicals. You know, if you lose a whole practical, it's a real problem to find time to fit that back in. And we don't want the students missing out on something which is a valuable learning experience for them.
It sounds really hands-on.
It's not as, for me, it's not as hands-on in some ways as I would like. You've done that thing where as you move through management, you get further away from the actual problem. So you might be the person who helps come up with the ideas of how to fix it and manage the people, but I couldn't ever take credit for the practical fixing of the things. That's the amazing team that works with me, you know, and they are quite phenomenal. I've never worked with dedicated teams like I have, and to be fair, in biology before I left biology. So I did 15 years in SBS, and the technicians there were amazing, and the technicians in chemistry are amazing. And I just hope that people realise that the university just doesn't work without the technicians. It just wouldn't happen.
Technicians make it happen.
We do.
And then changing your speciality from biology to chemistry, how was that? Or was it okay because you are kind of a bit more divorced now from the day-to-day aspect?
So so as a biologist at Edinburgh, I studied chemistry 1B, which is a biological course chemical course for biologists, and then chemistry 2H, because I really did enjoy chemistry as well. After the second year of chemistry, which was a half course, I realised I really wasn't very good at it. And the look on some of my lab demonstrators' faces when I was screwing the experiments up really kind of I did pass the course, but I just realised that I was never going to be a chemist and I should kind of move away before anybody gets hurt, kind of thing. So I can't pretend to understand a half or a third or whatever of what the guys here do, but having that basic scientific knowledge, you know, for instance, when things might not be safe and you're straying out of your comfort zone, and that's the time I'm going to ask the experts now before something silly happens, you know. And it gives you've got the advantage of being aware sooner of, for instance, a potential problem than somebody who doesn't have any scientific training. My predecessor here was a marine mechanical engineer. He'd been in the Navy, and mechanically he was amazing. Infrastructure wise, he was great, but he didn't have that kind of scientific knowledge to back him up. What I see as a real benefit to somebody in my role. You're also kind of able to get an inkling of when somebody's trying to take a lend of you. So, you know, somebody's explaining, we really need this because of this. And in biology, I found it even easier because I knew exactly what they were talking about. But you can kind of pick up like, this is something you want, but it really isn't essential, but you're asking me to provide it. So should I be paying for it? Should you be paying for it? That kind of thing. So you have these interesting kind of horse trading discussions where you eventually work it out and come to some sensible agreement to get things moving again. But that's something that we're seeing at the moment, you know, with the slight austerity that we have in the funding. There's more negotiations on how things are paid for and how they get fixed, etc. So,
when you were moving to move on in your career, you've had to move from place to place. So you didn't stay in the same environment, the same lab. And how have you found kind of the skill sustainability within that? Were you quite supported in your move? Did you find like a skills lost when you moved on? Skills that you had that you didn't necessarily get to pass on, or skills that weren't passed on to you that have taken time to pick up?
I think in many ways, because I've stayed on the same kind of general track of facility, kind of lab facility building management, I've accrued skills rather than lost them. I mean, I've lost all the skills that I had as a scientist. You know, give me a pipette now and it just wouldn't end well. You know, and my wife's still at the bench. She's still a researcher and she talks to me about things. I just feel so old and out of date now because everything's moved on so much in that 20 years. I can kind of hang on to the conversations by my fingernails and follow what she's saying. I don't really think I was supported in my transitions at all. I mean, probably the person that supported me the most during my career was Adrian Bird, who was the head of the Wellcome Trust Centre at the time. And I'm not pretending it wasn't a selfish thing. He had somebody there doing a good job, but he was very supportive. So he supported me in certain things that I was trying to achieve, like regradings and things like this. And then, it just got to the point where it was time to move on to new challenges and learn new skills. But I've never found a lot of the things that I've been suggested to go on about training courses. I remember going on a management training course years ago to Stirling, and it was this kind of thing where you have to get through the spider's web without touching it, and I just couldn't. I thought it was completely missing the point of what we were trying to do, because it really does come down to the communication and everything. I was thinking, this really isn't helping me develop at all, So, there's been one or two things that I've done through the university which have been quite good, that I've quite enjoyed and have taken on board. But a lot of it has been self-driven, to be honest. And I think it just got to the point where I needed new challenges, So even if I'd been promoted in the same place, I possibly would have moved anyway. And and oddly, I've actually turned down roles where I thought, well, this will be interesting. And I've been interviewed for, at least one role, and it was a definite promotion. I thought, no, I'm not sure that's for me, and they're really surprised when you turn it down when they offer it to you. But, if it's not for you, it's not going to work. If you're not. Exactly. And I have to say, chemistry it's a great place to work. I loved it in biology. I love it in chemistry. I mean, the people they're very open, very warm. We all want to get the same result, so generally it's a brilliant place to work.
There's been some issues within chemistry with RAAC buildings. I wonder if you'd like to give us an overview of that, because that's what you essentially won your award for, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was that. I mean, I think one of the pre-questions that I was asked to think about is, what do you get out of your post? What do you enjoy? And I love the challenges. I mean, and it's really perverse that you kind of almost want something big to go wrong so you can get your teeth into it and solve it. And it makes me sound like some kind of lunatic, I know, but so the news broke in the press about the RAAC concrete. And a few of us are thinking, oh, I really hope that doesn't mean, because obviously I have to give credit to Edinburgh University at this point. We are one of the few universities and few institutions across the UK who were aware of what we had and where it was. So many other places did not even know where the RAAC was. We knew where it was, and we'd been surveying it and keeping an eye on it. Was it deteriorating? But when the news broke, so you came in on the Monday morning and security had been through the buildings and just taped areas off, building work, do not enter. And obviously people like me knew exactly why. And then it was a case of, right, how do we cope with the displacement? How do we minimize the impact on the researchers? And I think it's very difficult to overemphasize the amount of stress, emotional stress, that all of a sudden landed on people like, young researchers, PhD students. All of a sudden their projects have stopped. Well, their time's ticking, their money is draining away because it's linked to the time. And it's a very, very scary time for them. So what we managed to do, luckily because of the nucleus came online and we got some extra lab space in the nucleus, which had meant we'd decanted out of one of our older labs into an old teaching lab, which had been decanted into new nucleus teaching labs. We had some spare space. If we hadn't had that spare space, it would have been very, very difficult to keep the research going. And I can't pretend that we kept it going without any glitches. We tried to minimize the downtime. We tried to minimize the space. Massive team effort from not only the technicians within in the school, but also the researchers that were affected. We managed to get the research up and running again, a lot of it within, say, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, because if you've ever had to shut down a research project, move it and get it going again, the shutting down is almost a lot easier than, if you shut it down, you move it, you put it together, but it never works straight away when you put it back together. You've got all that tweaking to do and all the troubleshooting. So we managed to get a lot of the research going within, 3 or 4 weeks. Not again, still involving a lot of stress. one of the major problems we had was the fact that something like 85% of our academic offices were under RAAC affected roofs. So we had to decant virtually every single academic we had in the school to other office spaces. So it was a case of commandeering meeting rooms, setting them up as multi-occupancy offices with the help of IT, getting space in Murchison, doing deals with people so you could camp down there for a certain number of months. And it turned out luckily that only 4 of our academic offices were seriously affected. And they've been mitigated now. They're safe to occupy again. So I think the academics were displaced for probably, 3 or 4 months before all the surveys could be done and we could pronounce those rooms safe. Because you've got to remember that when this broke, everybody wanted a structural engineer. Everybody wanted a surveyor. And again, the university was very quick off the mark with respect to saying, right, we need a contract with you, come and do this. And they got in there before the queue formed. I mean, we could have easily been waiting for engineers to come and survey 3 or 4 months down the line, again, because the university knew where the stuff was.
And where are we now with the RAAC situation? Is it all resolved? Is everything back to normal or ongoing effect?
No, I mean, so as I say, all the academic offices are okay, the ones that were affected. The lab spaces, unfortunately, are still decanted. We have a big contract, a reasonably big contract with Balfour Beatty. They have now set up site. We've stripped out the affected labs, which is, I think it's, about 6 affected labs, probably about 50 odd researchers displaced. Everything's been stripped out of the labs, and massive RSJ steels are going to be put into the rooms just to make sure that if in the future the RAAC weakens and falls, it's got nowhere to go. It's supported internally. So there's been a massive design process. The steel arrives on Thursday this week. It will start to go in the next 2 weeks. All being well, we should be moving back into the lab spaces. Hopefully, the soonest will be the end of February. The cynical ones among us think it might be a month or 2 after that, just because things normally go wrong in a building project at some point. But ideally, we'll be back in pre-Easter next year, which again, for this kind of project is a pretty good turnaround, to be honest.
So, David, you won your award for the infrastructure and facilities, and reading your nomination, I mean, it's obviously got a lot of those kind of practical solutions, that the kind of things you did, which I'd expect from a technician. What really struck me was, I guess, some of the language in there, that you were kind of calm and pragmatic, people focused, sensitive, a listening ear, all the kind of really good kind of people skills. I just wonder if you could kind of maybe say something about those, how important it was within the RAAC context, but in your career as well, being that people focused.
So I think a lot of it's got to do with, quite a bit of it's got to do with my parents. My father was an engineer, and my mother, had responsible jobs from a fairly early age. So we were kind of brought up to be sensible and not to panic. And I remember one problem I had to deal with in the Ashworth buildings before I left, and we'd had a major flood, and it ended up taking out the power in I think it was, to start with, it was Ashworth Building 3. And I remember, okay, this is what we've got. And I was actually in the building on my own. I'd been called in because the alarms had gone off. I was dealing with the problem, and then I walked through a fire door from Building 3 into Building 2 and realized that Building 2 had just lost power. And I remember literally freezing for what was probably milliseconds, but felt like minutes because of the adrenaline. I thought, oh my God, what do I do now? And just thinking, okay, step back, chop it into bits. How do you deal with it? You can't do it all yourself. You need help. So started calling out to various people I knew and I could trust from the buildings, various professors and things. We got a crew together and we dealt with the problem, started to deal with the problem before estates arrived, and then estates arrived and solved it for us. But potentially to lose 2 entire buildings of research labs and have nowhere to decant hundreds of fridges of freezers full of thousands and thousands of samples, And you're probably also talking there would have been at least 10, if not 20, minus 80 freezers to move and things like this. I mean, it was horrendous. But in some way, there was something inside me that just said, right, no point in panicking, won't solve. And I think it was my father in the background talking to me. The people skills to do this job properly, it's essential, in my opinion, to be a good manager. In my opinion, you need good people skills. You need to actually care. If you don't care, you can never be a good manager, because really it doesn't affect you what's happening. You know, you have to be invested in it. And if you take notice of how your staff are, what they need, even on a kind of a day-to-day, sometimes even an hourly level, and you can see somebody struggling, for instance, so you can think, okay, why are they struggling? What do we do to help them? What's the cause? How do we remove the cause? You know, so I've always tried to be a good listener and to help as much as possible. And if you can't help there and then, you can take the problem away, mull it over, try and come up with a solution. And I normally find that as long as people know that you care and know that you're trying, they will work with you to solve any kind of problems. You know, if you're just one of these guys who comes in and tells people what to do, doesn't pitch in, help, you know, and get your own hands dirty, it's never going to work, you know. And one of the things I think that was a good education was that 5 years in the Swan building, where I was essentially doing the job on my own. There was like one kind of permanent technician there, which was me. And I used to get help from the biology workshop at the time. Without them, I couldn't have achieved what I managed to achieve. The place wouldn't have run as smoothly as it ended up running. But to be the person doing 90% of the stuff meant that you learnt a lot, and you learnt how to get people to work with you, you know. Otherwise, it just wouldn't have gone anywhere. Sit in a corner and start to cry.
Yeah, those are great leadership skills.
I know it's really inspiring to hear you talk about just, you know, what you put into your role and all those skills. And I think by reading your nomination, listening to you talk about the problems that the School of Chemistry have had, it sounds like it could have gone very differently if you hadn't taken that approach. You know, even just for how people felt about how they were dealt with, and how, you know, your people skills coming through.
The other thing that's important is egos just get in the way. When you've got problems like this, if you've got somebody with a massive ego who tries to just command everything, then it normally doesn't work. So, for instance, the RAAC thing, so without technicians helping me physically move furniture and decant space and decant equipment, without IT helping set up IT stations for all the displaced academics, nobody can do everything. And without cooperating and coming into this in a kind of equal way, treating everybody as valuable. So I know it sounds a bit cliched and it sounds very modern, but really it does boil down to old-fashioned communication and cooperation. You know, but as soon as I'm in charge, you start to lose that. You know, you've got to be able to talk sensibly and calmly and equally with other people. Then you can all work together.
Well, that's great. Thank you, David. I wonder if, you know, as you look back on your career and, you know, what advice you would have for somebody if they went to follow in your footsteps, you know, kind of go into that kind of facility management type roles?
I think it's very odd. I mean, you know, in some ways I see myself as almost kind of pigeonholed within the university, because I've got like 22 years of experience now, I think, doing this role, but nothing official on paper. You know, I've got no project management experience. I've got no project management qualifications. I've got very few management qualifications. A lot of it's just kind of innate and has developed through experience. I probably would advocate, if you really want to do something like this role, to do at some point project management courses and qualifications, just so that you have a head start instead of just learning on the job. You know, I'm still learning now. And to be brutally honest, if I stop learning, I don't want to do it anymore. You know, if you're not learning, there's no point in being there. So, you know, but I would suggest that it is a good career. And if you get your kicks by helping people achieve what they're trying to do, then it's a brilliant role. For me, my love of science as a kid and my drive to go to university and to study biology, etc., it was a bit upsetting when that didn't work out. But to find out that I get almost as much joy from helping somebody else complete their research as if I was doing it myself, because of what happened to me with I say dyslexia. It's not dyslexia. It's actually neurodiversity. It's processing issues that I have with certain things. I see things. I understand problems in a different way, which sometimes can be a benefit. To be brutally honest, because you can see different paths to solutions. But because of the issues I had at school, and it was, as I said in the notes, it was one headmaster who realised that there was something going on that was a bit weird. And why was this lad who appeared to be quite clever just fighting all the time? And I was fighting because people called me stupid, and if they called me stupid, we had a fight. I am talking when I was very young, by the way. This has not happened for a long, long time. So he thought, this is a bit weird. So he got me assessed, and I got my diagnosis, and I got my extra lessons. And then people called me stupid because I had extra lessons. So you have another fight at that point. And my mother basically just then worked incredibly hard and moved heaven and earth to make sure that I was studying properly. Everything that could be done was done. And there's no way I would have gone to university without her help. She was the kind of driving force. But what it gave me was a passion and a love for education. And that's why I love being in the university, because that's what we do. That's our core mission. Education and research. And it's fantastic to be associated with that and to get the reflected glory of it. So
obviously the Technician Awards were kind of created to help recognise technicians for going above and beyond when doing it a great job, and for our visibility as well. Have you come across anything like this before in your career? Have you been recognised before, or do you think there are enough opportunities for technicians to be recognised?
I've been personally been put forward a few times over the years for, above and beyond, and been given kind of lump sums and things like that, which it's very, very nice to be recognised. It's not why we do it, but it's really nice when it happens. It's happened in biology and in chemistry for me, which has been great. The projects to raise the profile of technicians, they're very, very important. You can go back, if you go back, say, 25, 30 years, everybody had a technician. They tended to be permanent. They knew everything. They knew how to get what you needed, to fix what you needed fixed, etc., etc. And then as science changed and research changed and funding changed primarily, obviously everybody became more temporary. So there's very few permanent technicians these days. If you look at research groups, everybody tends to be on a grant. And what I've seen as a degradation of the technical role over the years has been fewer group leaders want a technician. They now want an RA who they will give technical jobs to, which degrades the ability of technicians to be employed and develop, etc., etc. Obviously, there's been so many things affecting this, like so many people get degrees now instead of more practical training, etc., etc. So I don't think we can ever go back to the traditional role of the technician, but I think we need to be mindful that having technicians within your organization is a massive benefit. Management sometimes say, yes, but they just cost money. They never look at the money that technicians save, the efficiencies they bring, the knowledge they hold, so problems don't last anywhere near as long, and things move a lot quicker. So yes, they might cost money to employ, but the time efficiencies and just general efficiencies they bring to an organization, I personally think massively outweigh what the technicians are actually paid, and when you factor in the fact that so many of the technicians that I come across, and I'm sure you do as well, the levels of dedication, you wonder where the hell they come from. Why do they care so much? Well, they're passionate about their school. They're passionate about their students. Our teaching technicians are really, really not happy unless every single student in their group of 50 to 100 undergrads who are being taught chemistry, and we teach chemistry to essentially everybody in the university, has to come here to learn chemistry. If they're not getting the best learning experience, our guys aren't happy and they want to know why and they want to fix it. Where does this dedication come from? Is it something innate in technicians, the type of people we are?
I think every technician listening to this podcast will be cheering at that point.
Yes, I think so.
No, I have to say, and things like this, obviously you've got people like Sally Morgan on KB, doing the technician stuff here. And I did notice the disparity, for instance, between at the award ceremony, the number of people from MVM as opposed to CSE. There was not that many people from KB there. And I think if we can get everybody on board to the same extent, I don't know whether at KB we're a bit more jaded. We might be suffering from a little bit of cynicism here, for various reasons. But I think what Sally and people are doing here to try and kind of get us all together and move things on it's a really good thing.
I think that sounds like a great point to end as well on.
No, it's been fun. It's been nice talking, and it's gone very quickly.
It has.
Interesting conversations always do. I think it's been great. Thank you very much. Congratulations on your award.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got pride of place in the office, and I shall be spending the voucher at Christmas time, I think.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, David.
Thank you so much. It was really interesting talking to you.
No worries.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Technically Edinburgh. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Lee Murphy, Imogen Hurd and Nick Kelly for their help in getting this podcast started. And of course to our incredible guests. Recognition and visibility are two of the key areas of the Technician Commitment and Initiative led by the UK Institute for Technical Skills and Strategy. It's so important to us that we make sure that technicians behind the research get the recognition and visibility that they deserve. And we hope this podcast is one small step towards that goal. Technically Edinburgh is hosted and edited and produced by members of the University of Edinburgh Technician Steering Committee. The music in this podcast is from Pixabay.com. Please follow us and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on X at UOE Technicians, and don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues. Have us on obnoxiously loud in your lab so everyone can hear. Oh, and if you have any ideas for topics, would like to come along and chat with us, or even think you might like to have a go at hosting, please get in touch at technician.network@ed.ac.uk. Thanks again to our amazing guest, our brilliant co-hosts, and you for listening. See you next time.